Hi guys, I'm back and I'm going to continue where I left off. Chapter 3, The Spout-Inn. Entering the gable-ended Spout-Inn, you found yourself in a wide, low, straggling entry with old-fashioned wainscots, reminding one of the bulwarks of some condemned old craft. On one side hung a very large oil painting, so thoroughly besmoked and every way defaced that in the unequal crosslights by which you viewed it, it was only by diligent study and a series of systematic visits to it and careful inquiry of the neighbors that you could anyway arrive at an understanding of its purpose. Such unaccountable masses of shades and shadows that at first you almost thought some ambitious young artist in the time of the New England hags had endeavored to delineate chaos bewitched. But by dint of much and earnest contemplation and oft-repeated ponderings, and especially by throwing open the little window towards the back of the entry, you at last came to the conclusion that such an idea, however wild, might not be altogether unwarranted. But what most puzzled and confounded you was a long-limbered, portentous black mass of something hovering in the centre of the picture, over three blue, dim, perpendicular lines floating in a nameless yeast. A boggy, soggy, squishy picture truly enough to drive a nervous man distracted, yet there was a sort of indefinite, half-attained, unimaginable sublimity about it that fairly froze you to it, till you involuntarily took an oath with yourself to find out what that marvelous painting meant. Ever and anon a bright, but at last deceptive idea would dart you through. It's the Black Sea in a midnight gale. It's the unnatural combat of the four primal elements. It's a blasted heath. It's a hypoborean winter scene. It's the breaking up of the ice-bound stream of time. But at last, all these fancies yielded to that one portentous something in the picture's midst, that once found out, and all the rest were plain. But stop! Does it not bear a faint resemblance to a gigantic fish, even the great Leviathan himself? In fact, the artist's design seemed this, a final theory of my own, partly based upon the aggregated opinions of many aged persons with whom I conversed upon the subject. The picture represents a Cape Horner in a great hurricane, the half-foundered ship weltering there with its three dismantled masts alone visible, and an exasperated whale, purposing to spring-cling over the craft, is in the enormous act of impaling himself upon the three mast heads. The opposite wall of this entry was hung all over with a heathenish array of monstrous clubs and spears. Some were thickly set with glittering teeth resembling ivory saws, others were tufted with knots of human hair, and one was sickle-shaped, with a vast handle, sweeping round like the segment made in the new-mown grass by a long-armed mower. You shuddered as you gazed, and wondered what monstrous cannibal and savage could ever have gone a death harvesting with such a hacking, horrifying implement. Mixed with these were rusty old whaling lances and harpoons, all broken and deformed. Some were storied weapons. With this once long lance, now wildly elbowed, 50 years ago did Nathan Swain kill 15 whales between a sunrise and a sunset, and that harpoon, so like a corkscrew now, was flung in Javan seas and run away with by a whale, yet afterwards slain off the Cape of Blanco. The original iron entered nigh the tail, and, like a restless needle sojourning in the body of a man, traveled full 40 feet, and at last was found embedded in the hump. Crossing this dusky entry, and on through yon low archway, cut through what in old times must have been a great central chimney, with fireplaces all round, you entered the public room. A still duskier place is this, with such low ponderous beams above, and such old wrinkled planks beneath, that you would almost fancy you trod some old craft's cockpits, especially of such a howling night, when this cornered anchored old ark rocked so furiously. On one side stood a long, low, shelf-like table covered with cracked glass cases, filled with dusty rarities gathered from this wide world's remotest nooks. Projecting from the further angle of the room stands a dark-looking den, the bar, a rude attempt at a right whale's head. Be that how it may, there stands the vast arch bone of the whale's jaw, so wide a coach might also drive beneath it. Within are shabby shelves ranged round with old decanters, bottles, flasks, and in those jaws of swift destruction, like another cursed Jonah, by which named indeed they called him, bustles a little withered old man, who for their money dearly sells the sailors' deliriums and death. Abominable are the tumblers into which he pours his poison, though true cylinders within, the villainous green goggling glasses, deceitfully tapered downwards to a cheating bottom. Parallel meridians, rudely pecked into the glass, surrounded those footpad goblets. Filled to this mark, and your charge is but a penny. To this, a penny more, and so on to the full glass, the Cape Horn measured, which you may gulp down for a shilling. Upon entering the place, I found a number of young seamen gathered about a table, examining by the dim light diverse specimens of skermshander. I sought the landlord, and telling him I desired to be accommodated with a room, received for answer that his house was full, not a bed unoccupied. But vast, he added, taping his forehead, you hain't no objections to sharing our harpooner's blanket, have ye? I suppose you are going a whaling, so you better get used to that sort of thing. I told him that I never liked to sleep two in a bed, that if I should ever do so, it would depend upon who the harpooner might be, and that if he, the landlord, really had no other place for me, and the harpooner was not decidedly objectionable, why, rather than wander further about a strange town on so bitter a night, I would put up with the half of any decent man's blanket. I thought so. All right, take a seat. Supper? You want supper? Supper'll be ready directly. I sat down on an old wooden settle, carved all over like a bench on the battery. At one end, a ruminating tar was still further adoring it with his jackknife, stooping over and diligently working away at the space between his legs. He was trying his hand at a ship under full sail, but he didn't make much headway, I thought. At last, some 4 or 5 of us were summoned to our meal in an adjoining room. It was cold as Iceland, no fire at all. The landlord said he couldn't afford it. Nothing but 2 dismal tallow candles, each in a winding sheet. We were fain to button up our monkey jackets and hold to our lips cups of scalding tea with our half-frozen fingers. But the fare was of the most substantial kind. Not only meat and potatoes, but dumplings. Good heavens! Dumplings for supper? One young fellow in a green box coat addressed himself to the dumplings in a most direful manner. "My boy," said the landlord, "you'll have the nightmare to a dead sartanity." "Landlord," I whispered, "that ain't the harpooner, is it?" "Oh, no," said he, looking a sort of diabolically funny. "The harpooner is a dark-complexioned chap. He never eats dumplings. He don't. He eats nothing but steaks, and likes 'em rare." "The devil he does," said I. "Where is this harpooner? Is he here?" "He'll be here afore long," was the answer. I could not help it, but I began to feel suspicious of this dark-complexioned harpooner. At any rate, I made up my mind that if it is so turned out that we would sleep together, he must undress and get into bed before I did. Supper over, the company went back to the bar-room, when, knowing not what else to do with myself, I resolved to spend the rest of the evening as a looker-on. Presently, a rioting noise was heard without. Starting up, the landlord cried, "That's the Grumpus crew. I seed her reported in this offing this morning. A 4 years' voyage and a full ship. Hooray, boys, now we'll have the latest news from the Fijis." A tramping of sea boots were heard in the entry. The door was flung open, and in rolled a wild set of mariners enough, enveloped in their shaggy watch-coat, and with their heads muffled in woolen comforters, all bedarned and ragged, and their beards stiff with icicles. They seemed an eruption of bears from Labrador. They had just landed from their boat, and this was the first house they entered. No wonder, then, that they made a straight wake for the whale's mouth, the bar, when the wrinkled little old Jonah, there officiating, soon poured them out brimmers all round. One complained of a bad cold in his head, upon which Jonah mixed him a half-pitch-like potion of gin and molasses, which he swore was a sovereign cure for all colds and catarrhs whatsoever, never mind of how long-standing, or whether caught off the coast of Labrador, or on the weather side of an ice island. The liquor soon mounted into their heads, as it generally does even with the Arantis toppers newly landed from the sea, and they began capering about most atrociously. I observed, however, that one of them held somewhat aloof, and though he seemed desirous not to spoil the hilarity of his shipmates by his own sober face, yet, upon the whole, he refrained from making as much noise as the rest. This man interested me at once, and since the sea gods had ordained that he should soon become my shipmate, though but a sleeping partner, one so far as this narrative is concerned, I will here venture upon a little description of him. He stood full 6 feet in height, with noble shoulders, and a chest like a cofferdam. I have seldom seen such brawn in a man. His face was deeply brown and burnt, making his white teeth dazzling by the contrast, while in the deep shadows of his eyes floated some reminiscences that did not seem to give him much joy. His voice at once announced that he was a Southerner, and from his fine stature, I thought he must be one of those tall mountaineers from the Alleghanian Ridge in Virginia. When the revelry of his companions had mounted to its height, the man slipped away unobserved, and I saw no more of him till he became my comrade on the sea. In a few minutes, however, he was missed by his shipmates, and being, it seems, for some reason, a huge favorite with them, they raised a cry of "Bolkington! Bolkington! Where's Bolkington?" and darted out the house in pursuit of him. It was now about 9 o'clock, and the room seeming almost supernaturally quiet after these orgies, I began to congratulate myself upon a little plan that had occurred to me just previous to the entrance of the seamen. No man prefers to sleep two in a bed. In fact, you would a good deal rather not sleep with your own brother. I don't know how it is, but people like to be private when they are sleeping. And when it comes to sleeping with an unknown stranger in a strange inn, in a strange town, and that stranger a harpooner, then your objections indefinitely multiply. Nor was there any earthly reason why I, as a sailor, should sleep two in a bed, more than anybody else. For sailors no more sleep two in a bed at sea than bachelor kings do ashore. To be sure, they all slept together in one apartment, but you have your own hammock, and cover yourself with your own blanket, and sleep in your own skin. The more I pondered over this harpooner, the more I abominated the thought of sleeping with him. It was fair to presume that being a harpooner has linen or woolen, as the case may be, would not be of the tidiest, certainly none of the finest. I began to twitch all over. Besides, it was getting late, and any decent harpooner ought to be home and going bedwards. Suppose now he should tumble in upon me at midnight. How could I tell from what vile hole he had been coming? Landlord! I changed my mind about the harpooner. I shan't sleep with him. I tried the bench here. Just as you please. I'm sorry I can't spare you tablecloth for a mattress, and is a ply guy rough board here, feeling of the knots and notches. But wait a bit, screamed Shander. I got a carpenter's plane there in the bar, wait I see, and I'll make ye snug enough. So saying, he procured the plane, and with his old silk handkerchief, first dusting the bench, vigorously set to planning away at my bed, the wild grinning like an ape. The shavings flew right and left, till at last the plain iron came bumped against an indestructible knot. The landlord was near spraining his wrist, and I told him for heaven's sake to quit. The bed was soft enough to suit me, and I did not know how all the planning in the world could make either down of a pine plank. So gathering up the shavings with another grin, and throwing them into the great stove in the middle of the room, he went about his business, and left me in a brown study. I now took the measure of the bench, and found that it was a foot too short, but that could be mended with a chair. But it was a foot too narrow, and the other bench in the room was about 4 inches higher than the planned one, so there was no yoking them. I then placed the first bench lengthwise along the only clear space against the wall, leaving a little interval between them, for my back to settle down in. But I soon found that there came such a draught of cold air over me from under the sill of the window that this plan would never do at all, especially as another current from the rickety door met the one from the window, and both together formed a series of small whirlwinds in the immediate vicinity of the spot where I had thought to spend the night. The devil fetched the harpooner, thought I, but stop, couldn't I steal a march on him, bolt his door inside, and jump into his bed, not to be wakened by the most violent knockings? It seemed no bad idea, but upon second thoughts I dismissed it, for who could tell but what the next morning, so soon I popped out of the room, the harpooner might be standing in the entry, all ready to knock me down. And I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoy this series. Please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and definitely leave a comment below. I totally appreciate it. So this was the first, this is chapter 3. This is the first part. There's going to be a second part in the next episode. Bye, guys.